Welcome to Red and April Off-Grid. We start this video framing out a few more windows and returning and buying more lumber. Then we move on to the design of the overhang and eaves, as well as a little about hurricane straps and prepping the lumber.
I've just finished putting on the rough opening for one of the windows. I had it roughed and I sheeted over it, and I cut the sheet out with a router. And then I came back in with this 2x6 and got the 2x6 flush with the inside boards. That means it sticks out 1.5 inches on the outside, which will take up some of the gap that the foam will need on the outside. And something I wanted to show here is how that this top header for the window, it's supported by this board underneath. And there's a direct line of wood all the way down to the sill plate to support the header. That's something that I didn't have before. So this is how the 2x6 looks like on the outside of the wall. So it sticks out about 1.5 inches, and the router made a nice clean edge. These boards are nice and flush with the inside. The next thing will be foam and then house wrap going into the window. I'm framing out the window for the guest bathroom here. This is along the north side of the house, and these are the only 2 windows on this side of the house. I actually called about the windows because it's been about 8 weeks since we ordered them, and they told us when we ordered them that it would be about 6 weeks before they came in. So I called just to get a ETA. When do you think we'll have them in? And they said they had no idea, and that orders that they're putting in now, they're telling people 12 to 14 weeks. So apparently, just like everything else is in the world, it's being delayed right now and lead times are being extended. Moving on to the south wall of the house, framing these big windows out. These are really big windows. These are all 5.5 feet tall. This one I'm working on here is 4 foot wide, so it takes a lot of lumber. Using 2x6s here to frame these windows out on this side, and I'll just be working my way across the side of the house. I actually didn't order enough 2x6s to finish all these out. I ran out midway, and so we had to make a trip into town for more lumber. We decided this would be an opportune time to round up all of the lumber that was warped and twisted and just defective from the last 2 big orders that we got in. I'd kind of worked my way through those lumber piles, and so I just collected up all the lumber that was warped and defective, and so it was actually a pretty full truckload or trailer load. It was a good amount of wood. And I actually tried to get them to come out and pick it up and replace it, but they were quite reluctant to do that. They kind of balked and hem-hawed about it, so we needed to go get new lumber anyway, so we decided just to load it all up, which took a good while because there's a lot of it, and take it into town ourselves. Once we showed up at the store with the warped and twisted lumber on our trailer, then they didn't give us any trouble. They were happy to exchange it, and so they had somebody come out and kind of unload it for us, and then we went through the store and picked out all the replacements. Here we are back home, unloading after spending a long day in town. We went in at about 10 in the morning and spent the entire day at Lowe's and got back at about 4:30. It's amazing how long it takes to load and unload and everything. Anyway, it's kind of late in the day. We spent a tiring day at Lowe's, and now we're unloading all the stuff that we bought at the end of the day. When we made the 2 original big orders that we had delivered, I hadn't, settled on the finer details of the eaves and some other things, and we hadn't quite figured out exactly how we were doing the roof. So anyway, we didn't end up ordering everything we needed, and so that's why one of the reasons we had to go back to town today and get everything is we made those original orders. We didn't have a full list. So we ended up getting some extra foam board to complete how we're doing the roofs, a whole bunch of 1x3s for the strapping on the sidewalls, and then various other pieces of lumber, some 4x4s, a whole bunch of different lengths of 2x4s and whatnot, as well as tongue and groove for doing the eaves. The next day we realized that we had forgot a few things or didn't realize we needed a few things, so we had to make another trip back to Lowe's. I didn't want to hook up the trailer this time, so we had to figure out how to fit 12-foot long 2x6s, a whole bunch of them in the back of our excursion. It was a little tricky, but we ended up getting them in there. Well, I'm finally ready to focus on the roof, and the first aspect of the roof is to get these eaves settled. So there's a lot of work that I need to put into the eaves before I can build up and finish the roof. So working on those here, I decided that I needed to cut off every other one of the sideboards that stick out on the side. Kind of the first thing I did was cut off every other one of the purlins that was sticking out. And then I needed to cut the remaining purlins to length. And so to do that, I wanted to snap a chalk line in order to get a nice straight line that I would then come back with my saw and cut all those off and get them all exactly the same length. So here I am working with the chalk line. We actually had the chalk line break. This was a brand new roll that I'd got. Here I am walking back and to get another one. Fortunately, I did have another one that I was able to dig out of my toolbox and snap that chalk line, and here I am following that line and cutting off each one of those. So these boards that remain sticking out will be the foundation for the eaves on the sides. Finished up on that side and then moved on to the other side and got both sides cut to length. So I'm targeting about a foot of overhang on all three sides except the front. So I'm just cutting these to the length that I need so that I'll have a foot of overhang after the wall is complete. This roof and eave system is definitely the most complicated I've ever built, and so I had to spend quite a bit of time trying to design and redesign. I've made drawings of it, detailed drawings that I've erased and redrawn like 5 times. The paper's getting thin because it's just a complicated system, but I'm looking for the most elegant and simple and attractive way to do it. Once I've settled on the final plan here, I moved on to working on brackets to attach the wood to the beams, so that's what I'm working on next. These are the brackets that I'm making for the eaves. So these brackets will allow me to attach wood to the metal beams and kind of make our decorative eaves that we're making. So these brackets are just a piece of 2-inch angle iron, which of course is 90 degrees. The slope is a 1/12 slope, and so that works out to be about 5 degrees off of 90. And so I have to bend these angles in order to get the wood that I'm attaching to the top of the beams flushed with the side of the house. So anyway, I'm just bending those and I'm getting those about 5 degrees off. So I have this angle finder set. I used this over here to set it. So I got it set at 5 degrees off 90. Now I'm bending it in my vise and just making sure I've got it nice and flat. So I'll show you how to do one here. I can just put it in my vise here and then just crank down on it and it actually bends it. And I've done enough of these, I know just about how far to go with it. And that gets a nice little bend in there. So I've got 4 holes drilled in for the bolts that will anchor it to the beam, and then 4 holes drilled in where it'll anchor to the wood. And it's also, painted with a matching paint to keep it from rusting, and also so it'll match the beams. Didn't get a lot of video of putting these brackets on, but basically I just got up on the roof, snapped a line along the beams so I had a nice straight line, and started mounting these brackets. I used self-tapping screws to attach them to the beams, nice heavy-duty self-tappers. And it really didn't take too long to get these mounted. April and I put a lot of thought into ways to strengthen the house. In case of high winds here in this area, we do get microbursts, which are our main concern, which can generate extremely high winds, sometimes even close to tornado level winds. And so that's why we put a lot of time and thought into making sure this house is really strong and able to resist a high wind load. And so one of our considerations was hurricane straps. And so we decided after researching it that we didn't need to put in the recommended amount for a house that was actually in a hurricane zone, but we decided to put some on with the idea that some would be better than nothing. So we put on probably quarter of or a third of what would be recommended for a house in that type of zone, just to add some additional strength to the house, probably above and beyond, but we decided that it would be worth the time to put some on. The ones that are on the floor, or close to the floor as you can see here, tie the sill plate into the stud, and then the long straps that you saw me put in previously attach the stud to the upper plate and to the top beam. So basically you're just tying in the top roof of the house all the way down to the sill plate. So I'm attaching these bottom brackets to the same stud that I attached the top brackets to up top, so that we're transferring the wind load all the way down from the roof to the foundation. Of course, the sheeting also ties everything together and is actually what gives the structure most of its strength. In fact, I actually have a pretty good count on the amount of nails that were used to attach the sheeting in this house. It was almost 3,000 nails, probably between 2,900 and 3,000 total, and those nails all provide shear strength for the structure to keep it from moving and tie everything together. I'm just working on the detail drawing for the roof, and this is on the side of the house here, and so it really helps me to get everything kind of drawn out and to scale. So this is a 2-scale drawing that shows basically a cutaway of the side of the house, including the wall coming up here. This is actually the interior ceiling of the house. Here's the I-beam that I made and how it connects. And this is a space here that'll be filled with insulation. Then it gives a detail of the different roof layers and how the eaves will kind of tie into everything. It shows kind of the foam envelope coming along the roof, 2 layers of foam along the roof, and then tying in directly to the foam envelope on the side. And so it ought to be a nice tight seal. It also shows how we'll do the decorative side of the eaves with exposed wood that we've done some kind of a treatment to and sealed, and including up underneath we'll have tongue and groove. And so it just shows how everything ties together, and I've got specific dimensions that I can create, that I can cut these boards to and make sure everything lines up. Basically, once I get this whole eave built, I want it to be exactly the height of the top strip that'll go along the top of the foam, so that my metal for the roof is all at exactly the same height. And so there's no height difference when we go to lay down the metal. There's a lot of wood that's going to go into these eaves that's going to be exposed, that we're going to be sanding and working on. So I've needed some way to work on it, and I didn't have any really big sawhorses that I was willing to get sealant on and stuff. And so I thought about making a set of sawhorses, then we realized we could just use the scaffolding. So here we are lowering the scaffolding down to kind of workbench top height. And then we have 2, so we just set them a few feet apart and put the wood in between them. Ended up working really good. It made a fantastic kind of work top. I started with the 2x4s that I would need and just rounded up rough boards. I'll cut them to exact length later, but I knew first I needed to get them all sanded down and prep for the treatment that we're going to be doing on these. All the wood around the house and the eaves, we got a special treatment that we're going to be experimenting on. I think it's going to work out really neat, but I need to get them sanded down and smooth first. So here I am sanding down a bunch of boards. Took a good amount of time. So the next day I moved on to the 4x4s that we'll be using for the front overhang. Front of our house has that 4-foot overhang. It's going to be kind of a decorative highlight of the home. Part of that is going to be these 4x4s, and I decided to go ahead and cut these to length and do pretty much all the prep work before I got them up there, just because they're big, they're hard to manage, hard to cut accurately. So I spent more time on these and cut them all to length, and then once I had them ready, I sanded them all down, and then pre-drilled all the holes to where I actually had to pre-drill and countersink the holes so I can screw them to the beams. I didn't have anything that cut deep enough to go through these boards with one cut, so you end up having to cut from both sides to get through these 4x4s, which is fine. You just have to take a little bit of extra time to line it up and make sure you got your markings well so that you don't have sloppy joints, but ended up working out okay. Here's the board that I have all my measurements written down. So I had got up on the roof previously and kind of measured everything out. I mean, exactly for every board. They got to fit in between the beams. I wanted the seams between these boards to line up over the beams so they'd be kind of hidden somewhat. There's actually a lot of these. There's 2 layers that go the full length of the house, so it's like 110 foot of beam. It's kind of a complicated thing, and I'm kind of trying to get them all pre-cut and pre-drilled before I put them up there, so I hope it all works out. If it doesn't, I'll be redoing quite a bit of work, but hopefully my measurements are correct and it'll all go together well on the day of. So here's my pre-drilling. I'm going to be anchoring these in with heavy-duty self-tappers that will anchor them to the beams that stick out along the front, and I'm putting in as many screws as I can to make it a good, firm, secure attachment. I'm actually using the same screws that I used to attach the purlins with, the purlins to the metal beams that of course the sheeting is attached to. So using those same screws to attach these to those beams that stick out the front. These 4x4s that are using here are good, straight, good quality lumber. These are some of the ones that we'd picked out ourselves when we went to the store the last time. And we took a lot of time to go through and find the best lumber we could pick through them carefully, and it really pays off because these are going to be exposed beams that are going to be kind of a feature of the house, and we needed good wood that's straight, that's not twisted and all that. So kind of our time spent at the store personally selecting good quality lumber here that paid off because it just made it so much easier to work with these. Finishing up drilling, pre-drilling, and then there's quite a bit of sanding that I had to do as well. In our next video, we'll show you the finishing process for these boards, so I'm excited about this. It's a technique and a product that I haven't seen a lot of people use and do, and I think it should make for a really nice result. So I'm excited to show that and excited to put that up and see how it looks. So make sure to tune in next time. We'll be doing that to these boards to get the final look that we want to. We'll also be sealing them with a special sealer that I'll tell you about, and then actually start putting them up, and I'm hoping it'll be a pretty dramatic look for the house. So make sure to tune in next time to see that. Thank you for watching, and if you enjoyed our video, make sure to like and subscribe.